did the interest in getting into film take place, and how did you get in?
Well, that was really by by accident, really. Once I'd kind of got into my teenage years, I was very serious about not about becoming a professional musician because I never thought that was on the cards. I was just serious about this is what I wanted to do. So I used to practice in those. I mean, I haven't practiced for 20 years, I don't think, but in those days, I used to really try to be better as a
Mm,
guitarist, and I ended up by the age of about 15, I was playing on records of some of the local bands in Liverpool that were getting signed at the time. So I
right.
became a session player even while I was still at school. And then when I left school, I got offered to play with a band called the Lotus Eaters, who had just had a huge hit in England. And I was also working with a singer called Thomas Lang, who had just been signed to CBS, which is now Sony. So I was already kind of in the mix of being paid for work. So I ended up touring with these bands and a few other bands and playing on records right up until I was 25, I think. And it was amazing because, I got to tour Japan and all over Europe and Scandinavia. But while I was working with these bands, I ended up writing songs with some of them. So I was evolving into more of a songwriter at that point. I was more interested in writing material. And I think I was 25 or 26, and through writing songs for these bands, along with my partner at the time, David Hughes, we somehow got offered the chance to write some songs on a tiny little no-budget film called Leon the Pig Farmer. So we sort of pitched for that. The songs ended up in the film, but the movie was still being made. And it was so low budget, the director and the producer met with us one day and said, "We can't afford to hire a composer to write the score. Do you think you two boys could write a film score?" And coming from Liverpool, we're like, "Yeah, of course we can. How hard can that be?" So we just lied and said we could, of course we could do it. And I've told the story many times, but it's completely true. We had the meeting with the producer and the director in London, and as soon as they left the cafe, we were on Old Compton Street, and Dave and I walked out of the cafe thinking, how the hell are we going to figure out how to write a film score in like a week? But where we were in London, Charing Cross Road was just around the corner, and there was a lot of bookshops there and a lot of film shops. We thought we'll go and find a book on how to write a film score. And we walked in the first film bookshop there because it's famous, that little street, for very art stuff. And we walked in and almost like jumping off the shelves like some kind of mythical thing was a book called How to Write a Film Score. This old book. So we thought, destiny. So we bought the book. I think it was like £2 or something. And we got on the train back to Liverpool, and we thought, well, we'll read the book on the train, and when we get back to Liverpool, we'll know how to write a film score. Being from Liverpool, instead of reading the book, because in those days you could get alcohol on the trains to Liverpool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, you could just go to there and you could just buy some beer from the little bit of the middle of the train. That's all. I think they sold a few newspapers, some potato chips, and then beers and cokes. So we ended up just getting drunk on the train, celebrating. And to this day, we still never read the book. Maybe I would have been a better composer. I don't know, but we never ever read the book. So when we got back to Liverpool, my little bit of education was I spent a week watching all my favorite movies on VHS, because we had VHS then.
Yeah.
And I would just make notes, So I watched King Kong, The Godfather, Ben-Hur, all these brilliant movies, Psycho. And I was just sitting there with a little school pad making notes of like where music came in, where it didn't come in, what happened here. Oh, was the scary bit, the scary. So I just did that for a week, and I must have watched about 30 or 40 of my favorite movies. And then I was like, okay, let's write the score. And that was it. But the funny thing was, when this tiny movie came out, it got a huge amount of publicity in England, and it won awards at the Venice Film Festival, and it
Oh, wow.
in Europe. So this tiny little movie that we didn't even think was going to come out that had hired these two clueless songwriters to write this clueless score. Got a bit of traction, and of course, because everyone was a first time director, first time composer, we all kind of stuck together. So they went on to make another movie. The writer went on to make another movie, the director, and then the producer. And they all came to me and David and said, do you want to write the music for our next movie? And suddenly we were film composers, completely by default, completely undeserved, no training, no anything. But we worked so hard because we both had that thing. We didn't want to let people down. And, we worked our asses off and we learned as we went along. So it's a strange, it's not the way you're supposed to train to be a film composer, but that's how it happened for me. And you learn by your mistakes, and you never forget your mistakes. So
I think it's the right way because when you go to film school or music school, not taking away from what you will learn at UCLA or any other amazing, incredible school, but sometimes, if not most of the times, you have to be on the set. I mean, that's where you learn the most, to be in that situation. I mean, Spielberg was, I think he dropped out from school or college, I don't remember. So it's just being on the set just teaches you so much, or being on the verge of, like, I was listening to this speech the other day. I'm not sure who it was. Like, when the only way as humans we are able to find out our limitations are not limited is when we are put up against resistance. Like,
absolutely.
that's when the best, we just don't know how capable we are until we're put in the corner.
It's so true, because it's only when you're put in situations where you've never been before that you find out what you actually can do when you're up against it. And that was not being musically trained in any way and being put in these positions, it forced us to learn. There was no let's see what the lecture is next week. It forced us to learn out of fear, because we needed to know how to suddenly use strings and suddenly, but thankfully, at least I'm a firm believer that as amazing as it is to have a great musical education with film, because really, for me, the most important thing in film music is actually understanding story.
Of course.
And being able to understand why the characters feel that way, and why this would be important to this character, or why the theme of this movie is important to people. Only when you understand that can you really, in my opinion, really deliver a great score.